Okay, it's looks like it's 7:32, and we're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to start with our Utilities Commission meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes. So are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes of the previous meetings?
I move to be accepted as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's passed unanimously. Cash on hand and in the banks, our cash on hand as of February 18th, 2014 is $893,607.63. Okay, the next order of business is a motion to pay the bills.
I move we pay the bills.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Passed unanimously, and that brings us to Mr. Sipes' Utilities Report.
Evening, Mayor and Council. A couple things since the last meeting. One is a continuation. We're still having some frozen pipes, busted pipes, where they need the water turned off. That's keeping us pretty busy. Over at the wastewater plant, because of the weather and the melt, the water temperatures have dropped. When the water temperatures drop, it kind of retards the nitrogen removal. So we've seen that spike in January. Nothing to be concerned about, because January and December are usually the highest months for the nitrogen. But we've made an adjustment at the plant, and it's back under control. It's not enough to throw us out for the year, and the way that the total nitrogen and total phosphorus numbers work, it is a running cumulative total for the entire year. Now, by the time we hit July and August, it'll be non-existent. So what happened in January, we can make up for. I talked to a contractor because with all the lines we've been digging up, that means a lot of street repairs. Typically, we aren't able to make those repairs until the blacktop plant's open. We're going to go ahead and he's going to make the repairs with cold patch, and we're going to see how that holds up. We do have a lot of cold patch repairs in town that hold up well. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I talked to him today. He's going to come see me tomorrow, and we're going to try to get those scheduled as soon as possible. The longer they're there, the more time it takes to maintain them, and hopefully we can get that knocked out before the end of the month. And that's all I have.
I would think the cold weather would aid in like the bacteria and all the other junk that gets into your sewage water. That's not true? Would keep it down?
Keep what down?
The nitrogen.
With all this water running in, storm water and everything else gets into the drain.
It does. The temperature of the water is the issue. When you get temperatures coming into the plant below 15 degrees Celsius, the metabolism, the biological cycles inside of the plant slow down. So that when it would normally take a 24-hour period to nitrify and denitrify, with the slower temperatures, we're not able to get it done on either end. So normally when you have a nutrient issue, you will see either your ammonias go up because you're not oxygenating enough, or you see your ammonias down and your nitrites and nitrates will go up because you're not denitrifying. In the absence of oxygen, the bacteria break down and remove oxygen molecules from the nitrites and nitrates. But when all that slows down, they're not getting it accomplished fast enough. So we're seeing the ammonia and the nitrogen together start to come up. Now that's the type of thing that is difficult to address, because it's not just a matter of turning the air up higher or turning it down lower, because you're going to impact it like a scale. When you get one to go down, the other one's going to go up. So we adjusted the air cycle time so that the on-off time is still 50%. But it doesn't run as long of a cycle. So normally the air was on 50 minutes, off 50 minutes. We changed that. We're going with on 30 minutes, off 30 minutes. A little change like that can make a big impact, and it has. It's speeding the process up a little bit. It's not letting it go too far in one direction before we bring it back. And so far it looks like it's working.
Any other questions?
I can smell chlorine.
In the water? Normally, you will smell chlorine in the water because it's a gas the first time you turn that faucet on in the daytime. That's not unusual. That's because it's been sitting in the pipes under pressure, and some of that gas releases inside the house where it's warmer. So once that water has been displaced, that's been sitting in the pipe and gotten warm and released some of the gas, that smell goes away. Now, the chlorine that we put in the water is minimal. I know sometimes it seems like you could put it in a swimming pool, but it's not that high. Last month we ran an average of 0.8 milligrams per liter. We have to run it at least that, so that at the furthest point of the distribution system, we still have chlorine present. When you don't have chlorine present at all, you can end up with regrowth issues of bacteria, and that's the last thing we want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. Should we call Bill in and...
Well, you have to ask if there's any.
Oh, are there any questions from the audience? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad I majored in environmental studies. It actually made sense to me.
Good for
I'll
you.
make a motion, we close the utility meeting.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Any
you.
opposed? Okay, the Utilities Commission meeting is officially closed.
Shoot.
So should I wait for Bill or should we just keep going?
You can go ahead and start. I'll be on.
All right, let's go ahead and call the mayor and council meeting to order. Our first order of business for the mayor and council meeting is to approve the minutes of the mayor and council meeting of February 3rd, 2014. So are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes of the previous meetings?
I have a question about business in the minutes. I can ask that later, or is it appropriate now?
Probably appropriate now, I would think.
Well, there's a mention on the second page of the parking survey, and Linda said she was surveying downtown. When I can remember something about parking, because I'm getting comments now as well.
It's not finished yet. Everybody wants to talk. It takes me an hour to
Get in
visit.
All
and
right.
out.
I'm close. But really, we need to go into an executive session before we do that.
Okay.
Not tonight.
But it's in progress and near completion.
Actually, it's in my coat pocket.
Good, that's all.
Okay.
Somehow I've misplaced my February meetings, but I've read them and I would approve them as submitted.
Okay, is there a second?
Yes, I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, looks like that was unanimously approved. Cash on hand and in the banks is $1,932,811.74, as well as the Washington College donation, which is a restricted use fund for $200,000 for a total of $2,132,811.74. The next order of business is the payment of the town's bills.
I move we pay them.
Okay, is there,
Having reviewed them.
I'll second.
all those in favor? Any opposed? All right, moving right along. We were supposed to have Miles Barnard in,
He can't make it till the March 3rd.
okay. All right, so we'll see Miles in a couple of weeks. Which brings us to the police report. Chief Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If I may, I think maybe chronologically, we'll get the last year first. So
Okay.
we'll go with the annual report, and I'll just go through it quickly. If any questions, by all means, let me know. I don't have the answer, I'll get it for you. First page, we have calls for service, and you'll see the 2013 is decreased by the graph, and specifically from last year, as I explained in the last sentence there, and I have a time or two. This year, I counted calls for service separate from patrol checks. In the previous years, they were combined, and I wanted to separate that out, and if you would add our patrol checks and our call for service, you'd be right about the mark that we were last year, so it's a little misleading there. Our adult arrests are down just a little bit over last year, and we're trending down, and that's a good thing. Our juvenile arrests are just barely up from last year, from 34 to 37, an insignificant increase. Our civil citations are right on par, a couple up from last year, and we broke them down. Littering is number 2, open containers were number 1 violation, and there's a few others. We had 20 DWI arrests, and that was on par with last year, which was 22. Our CDS arrests were 39, last year was 35, very close again. Traffic is close, and traffic warnings are close. Part 20 crimes are very slightly up from 165 to 171 this year. And Part 2 crimes are down just a little bit from 294 to 279. And we broke down all the different adult charges. I put some of the major ones in red. I probably should have had a couple more, but just a couple to get your attention. Next page is our juvenile charges. Then we have our canine operation. As you know, we have 1 canine currently in service. In probably about May, we'll have a second. And then the next page is the camera enforcement program. I did an average monthly citations, which is 208. And if you're listening to the radio, there's a lot of news about camera enforcement programs and some legislation that may or may not pass through Annapolis, so we'll pay attention to that. Kent County Narcotics Task Force, of significance here, we broke down the quantity of drugs that were seized, and particularly heroin, which is a rather alarming rate. This is kind of an unfortunate paper to deal with. We claim success by confiscating and seizing a lot of drugs, but on the other hand, it is a success because they're out there. So we really like to have 0 in some form or fashion. But just for a reference point, that heroin confiscation last year was around 20 grams. So this one's 495 this year. And then lastly, KBI, which is the Joint Investigative Force of the State Police and Chester County Police and their statistics. So if I will just give you a summation of the year. Our crime is generally steady or slightly down, which is a good thing, but I'll never be presumptuous enough to say
You got it.
we did great things, and that, there's so many factors that go into these statistics. But they paint a picture, and Councilman Shoghi, I haven't forgotten your request for a comparative data, and I just haven't received that from my counterparts yet. So I keep gently reminding them that I'd like to have those annual reports too.
Right.
And as soon as I can get 2 or 3, I'm thinking like Denton might be a pretty decent one close by, or Centerville or something like that. As soon as I get them, you'll have them so you can make a comparison.
Great.
Don't you think, not that the police department isn't doing a great job, but the reflection in juvenile arrests, there's quite a coalition, the fact that we just don't have as many juveniles in Chestertown as we had at the time.
Well, like I said, there's so many factors, but that's a very fair observation. If they're not here, they're not.
Yeah, well, the high school is half as big as it used to be.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. If there are any questions, we'll move forward to 2014.
Can I ask one more question
Yes,
about
sir,
the
you may.
speed? Did we have problems with the camera in June? We only had 84.
Yeah, if you want to dissect that, well, I don't need to look at it. We did have camera problems. There was 1 month, as I recall, and maybe it is June, that the camera was not even up. And then the next month, it was a partial month, so it was like, I don't know, 30 or something like that. So both of those are kind of an
Yeah,
anomaly.
I can't believe that everybody just plain stopped speeding on that road for
Yeah,
that
right, right.
period of
That's what
time.
that's from, I should have pointed that out. Here's your overtime breakdown. Okay, so statistics for January 2014. Wait, no.
I don't have your monthly report. Did you?
It's sent up through town hall. I can give you my copy. when I
All right,
finish
I'll
with
share
you.
Linda's if she doesn't.
Okay.
Here, you can.
Do you need
So,
one?
Gonna share this.
administration, we spent 5% of our time, which was 50 hours. Criminal investigations, 29 hours, which was 2%. Our accident investigation was 15 hours, 1% of our time. Our vehicle patrol was 698 hours, which was 58% of our time. Our foot patrol was 85 hours, which was 7%. Training was 43, which was 4%. Court time was 39 hours, yielding 3%, and our overtime was 84, yielding 7%. And I sent that paper around. I'll discuss that right now, might as well. Overtime was spent on 5 different categories. Court was the majority at 40, and let me say, unlike the last time, I actually put hours on this instead of percent. I think it's more meaningful because if we went from 1 to 2 hours, I have to talk about a 100% increase. So I just put the actual hours on it this time.
Is the reflection of so many hours in court, is that circuit court or district court?
Both, and I didn't break it down. But
Because district court now, a lot of people don't request that court date, so there's not as much court going
yes, sir,
on.
and as you know, in circuit court, that can be an extended.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference. They want you there forever for nothing.
Yes, sir, it could be one case, could be quite a few hours. And then I was requested by Councilman Stetson to break down the one category, which was shift coverage, and that was a total of 18 hours for the month, which is, a small amount. And in one case, it was 9 hours for an officer to attend the family funeral, and one case, an officer called in sick at the last minute. So that's why we had to utilize overtime to take care of that. With regard to our adult arrests, we had 12, and that involved 22 separate charges. Most common was CDS, which is 6, 4 for FOAs, which is 4 other agencies, 2 each for DWIs, assaults, FTA, and fail to obey, and 1 each for resisting arrest, theft, second-degree escape, and trespassing. We had 1 juvenile arrest that was for assault, and we had 2 civil citations for noise. Our Part 1 offenses were 8. We cleared 2 by arrest, 1 by exception. Our Part 2 offenses were 12. Cleared by arrest were 6, 3 by exception. Motor vehicle citations issued were 47. We had 146 warnings issued, and our red speed camera was 249 citations. We had 1 criminal citation.
Is it up to the officer when it comes to motor vehicle citations? Is it up to their discretion to give citations or warnings, or is there a criteria that constitutes a citation rather than a warning?
The appropriate response from a police administrator is the officer always has discretion. And they do. But there are certain violations of, I guess, a more serious or egregious nature that generally they will issue a citation for. And quite often, it may be an individual who received 1 citation and 4 warnings or something like that. But there's not a policy that tells them they must write a citation.
You don't get a warning for DWI, if that's what you're trying to say. I wonder if you'd want to comment on the fact that the state police have went and pulled their people out of the drug task force in the regional areas.
I will address that generally. I don't think that it would be appropriate to be extremely specific, but the state police have not made a final decision yet, but we have attended meetings where they are indicating that they most likely will use their force, which is currently in the county drug task force system, in a joint regional team, I guess you would call it. And until that actually happens, we will continue to operate as normal. That's a decision that the state police have made, but I will tell you, and you can look at the statistics in the annual report, that unit, in my opinion, is a very vital and critical tool that we use in fighting drug crimes, as it is.
I think they thought about or tried that once before and decided it didn't work very well and went back to what they were doing originally, so.
Having gone through this and learning the history, you're exactly right. As a matter of fact, I understand it was about 3 times that it's been tried and then abandoned. So I kind of think we might be on the same page here of what we would like to see, but...
Has to do a little bit with when they change command, somebody gets a better idea or something, but...
That very well may be part of it, yes, sir. But I assure the citizens in this council that the Chestertown Police will do their very best to fight crime, and particularly drug crime. And bearing in mind that drug crime is unfortunately often associated with all the other crime. The guys and gals, men and women that are dealing in that venue are also the people that are committing assaults and doing burglaries and all kinds of nefarious acts to support those habits. So to say that it's only drugs is very superficial, and so we really take it seriously, and we'll throw everything we have at it. With regard to the breakdown in wards, we had 3% of our calls in Ward 1, 41% in Ward 2, 15% in Ward 3, and 3% in Ward 4. Our busiest day of the week was Thursday, followed by Friday. And the busiest time of the week was 9 to 10 and 3 to 4. And that's 2 other items of business. One is I've met with the town and have expressed my desire to do this. I would like to do it immediately unless there is some objection. In years past, the Chestertown Police had a reserve officer program. And basically what that is you have a force of officers who are certified and kind of on standby, part-time if you will, that can be utilized in the event of a need for manpower surge. And I would only use that available force in situations like maybe this weekend, the Washington's Ball or the Tea Party or something like that. In an effort to address overtime costs, I can have an officer work at a regular rate instead of an overtime rate, and it just bolsters the department to have an extra body in case we need them. Like I said, for these, it's not going to be utilized for a day-to-day patrol or in place of manpower as far as staffing a position, but it's a great opportunity, and particularly because the one individual, specifically Officer Kinzer, who left the department in December, is interested and available, and I approached him asking if he would consider it, and he's very interested. So you may see Sam resurrected in uniform, which we're very happy to have him. And then lastly, I unfortunately wish to read a resignation letter from Patrolman Pisecki. I respectfully submit to you in the town of Chestertown my official resignation from the Chestertown Police Department. My resignation is to be effective February 24th, 2014. As you know, I've accepted a position with the Kent County Sheriff's Office. The move is in the best interest for me personally and professionally and gives me the ability to grow my career in law enforcement. It's been my honor and privilege to serve the citizens of Chestertown and Kent County over the past 3 years. I'm grateful to the town of Chestertown, the Chestertown Police Department, and the Maryland State Drug Enforcement Division for the opportunities and experience I've obtained during my time with the department. I've matured both professionally and personally during my time with the Chestertown Police Department and have gained knowledge and skills that most do not get the opportunity to gain. Like the letter says, his resignation will be effective February 24th.
He's been with us for what, 3 years?
3 years, yes, sir.
So that means he's off the hook for paying us back.
Just made it in there, yes, sir.
I'm very sorry to see Bert go.
He's a great officer, and I wish him well in his new career. Any other questions?
So in terms of the sort of officer on call, do we as a council need to approve that?
The reserve officer?
Yeah.
I think Chief was going to draft a policy just so that we have one.
Yes, sir.
It's done a lot of places, but I think just for your manual, you
We
need...
did it here for years and years. I mean,
Yes, sir.
every time a tea party, if I didn't have reserve officers, I couldn't handle it, because I only had
Yeah.
5, 6 every
Right,
officer.
it's like a surge opportunity, and I wouldn't see that body being more than probably 2 officers. Is that about what you had, 2 or 3 or something like that?
So in other words, these are people that live in the area that are already officers
Already
and they're just
certified.
agreeable to coming on for special events or...
Right, and they still must maintain, first of all, there's a body that governs this
Okay.
activity, which is
Yeah.
the Maryland Police Training Commission. So they have to have full certification and training and all that kind of stuff, so.
And part of the reasons they want to work as a certified officer is so they can
Keep their certificate,
certification.
yeah, I get that.
Somebody has to send them over to school and
Yeah.
whatever it is.
So as Mr. Ingersoll said, I will certainly provide you with our
Okay.
manual directions on that.
Okay,
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good evening.
thank you.
Sir, copies of the annual report for the pres and everything?
Yes, I will be happy to get them for you.
I can come over and get them.
Not a problem, yes, sir.
They were handed, I thought,
These CDS arrests,
out that last time.
you heard that, you associated the drugs with the crime. These CDS arrests, is there a number, like how much is marijuana, how much is some other substance? Because I have a hard time believing that somebody smoking marijuana is like a danger to the public. I mean,
Yes, I believe that's broken down in the annual report. If it's not, I'll get it for you. And you would like a copy of the annual report also?
Yes.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, next on the agenda is the town manager's report.
Start out with something easy. The mayor has stated, and you all have planned to have a public hearing or a meeting on Monday, March 10th on the C1 district. So Jen and I worked on this afternoon. This will be distributed to all the C1 enterprises so that they'll give you each one. It's a good reminder to put on the refrigerator.
This is true.
Yep. So we'll do this for each district, and Sydney will be making the deliveries of them, and we'll send a couple to the shopping center owners so that they can, if they have a way to contact all their businesses, they can. And hopefully that'll get you the crowd that you want for that and all others. We just follow that same pattern unless it doesn't work. And I thought another good way with the C1 district would be to approach the Chamber of Commerce next door and sort of check off on how many of their members are actually in the C1 district in Chestertown. And I think Loretta would probably be happy to do that for us. It's just another way to make sure we reach these people.
She could put it in that newsletter that comes out. Geez, I get one about every other week, so.
Yeah, well, they may say, hey, look, all these people in this district aren't our members, and they may want to do it, they may not, but I think if we can check off members that are, just by Chestertown addresses, that would be a help.
This is going to paper or what will you do with it?
We'll be sending this to individuals.
Oh, you are, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm trying to show you, and if anybody looks at it and says, hey, that doesn't work, that's not what we're going to do, please read it, because it hadn't gone out yet. But I think it says, here's what it says: host a series of economic workshops in an effort to engage local businesses in a discussion on ways to help make local business successful in Chestertown. And invites everybody in that district, C1, which is really High Street extended, Washington Avenue, it's extended almost exclusively, a little bit down here in this district. Now, the next thing that's on the agenda is not really mine, but I think it falls correctly. A discussion of a draft ordinance on campaign finance disclosure. And I just want to make a couple of initial remarks about any changes in the future to the way we conduct elections, and maybe this isn't connected with elections, and maybe it is. But the charter is a difficult thing to change, and I know we've talked about a primary and all, but in looking at this and trying to figure out where it would drop in codification, I came across this, and knowing that a charter change is a hard thing to make, this section 34, regulation and control by council. There's a lot of information in the charter about elections. It's specific, but this says, I think, what you need to know. The council shall have the power to provide by ordinance or emergency ordinance in every respect not covered by the provisions of this chapter for the conduct of registration, nomination, and town elections, and for the prevention of fraud in connection therewith, and for recount of ballots in case of doubt or fraud. But this is basically says, you have all this in your charter, you can pass an ordinance that says, okay, we want to have primaries, we want the Board of Supervisors of Elections to do this, 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 or this. You know, if you want to refine, and there's always, every election, there's always a question or two like, hey, what happens if? What happens if 20 people run for office? Are we going to have a primary, or are we going to have a runoff afterwards? You know, that the thing is, if you keep trying to change the charter and that, and everybody goes, no, we didn't get that right, let's do it again. That's a really hard process. And I strongly recommend that you look at things like this, but also the things that have bothered you in other elections, like, okay, what happens if we have a tie in a ward or for a mayor? And involve your Board of Supervisors of Elections. They did a fantastic job last time. They have a lot of knowledge about our own process, and maybe also the County Board of Supervisors of Elections, because those people were invaluable in our last election, most complicated election that we've ever had. So without getting into too deeply, I was looking over Mr. Stetson's proposed ordinance, and I was trying to figure out, okay, where do we drop this? Is this ethics, or is this campaigns, or is this elections? And I think we need to evolve a section on elections where we refer back to the charter and say, Section 34 lets us do this, and do it that way. And that's just sort of clearing the way for your discussion, okay?
Yeah, I think basically you can do it, as I said, you and I had this discussion, as long as you don't change the charter, all you're doing is adding to it. I mean, you can't,
Right.
You can't say change when we're going to have it and so forth, but I do think you can tighten it up, and in this case, have financial reporting, which is needed. So I think it's a good way of handling it, and it's a lot quicker than a charter amendment, that's for sure.
The materials that you put in, they're not really, they need to be, to become an ordinance and fall into codification, they need to be reworked. And the forms are something that the Board of Supervisors of Elections or somebody would monitor, so they wouldn't actually go in the ordinance, okay? Those are
Right.
just my comments.
You need some kind of a guideline, and that's what this
Yeah,
is.
that's a good start. But
If you've read some of my emails, it came from Frederick, and I modified it somewhat. I do think the purpose of Frederick's wording and verbiage is something that's needed in that ordinance. It explains to them why we're doing it. I mean, and it's very short, it's only 50 words or so, and it tells the reason for doing this, so. But I think Liz has did a lot of research on it and looked it over and come up with some ideas. I left that primary thing in there, but I'm not so sure, since we run unaffiliated, I don't know exactly how you would do a primary anyway, so
I don't either.
I think you should just have it, and if somebody doesn't get, if you have 4 or more people and nobody gets 35%, then you have a runoff for the top 2. And that would say that chances are we may never have one, but, and I also addressed, if you remember with the email about, I don't think we should be in the point where we flip coins to decide who wins the contest. If it's tied, I think we need a runoff in that case too.
So Liz, do you want to make some comments on the
Right.
ordinance or the draft that Marty gave out?
Yeah, so first comment is, from now on then, let's call this document a preliminary draft for a new ordinance on conduct of elections, or, and in this particular issue, it's on campaign finance disclosure. Mr. Stetson raised this issue several times during the campaign, and he vowed to follow up on it, and now he has. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, he gave us this draft document, which is the result of his statements during the campaign. I hope you've all read it, and as he said, I have done a fair amount of additional research, primarily on the internet. Basically, I welcome this as a step to something that a lot of us talked about during the campaign, a step towards more transparency in the way we do things here in Chestertown. My one concern is that we don't need a sledgehammer to drive a thumbtack into the wall. I'm sure that we can come up with a workable process that will do two things. It will shed light on campaign donations, and I think we need to talk about expenses, without burdening candidates for elections in this little town and our Board of Elections with undue bureaucratic paperwork. So what I'd like to propose this evening is that we each comment briefly. My understanding from Bill is that the process for an ordinance is that it should be, the discussion should be completed, I think you said within 60 days of the initial discussion. So I'd like to propose, just so you're forewarned, that each of us, we share comments by email before March the 10th, and that Marty and I can take a lead on coming up with a revised draft for discussion at our meeting on March the 17th. That's where I'm going with this. So since I have the floor, I'll go first. I was wondering, I discussed this late this afternoon with Bill, whether actually our annual financial disclosures that we're all required to submit as members of the council could do this job.
No, it cannot.
Apparently they don't, because I would not have to report on contributions given to Citizens for Liz Gross, or Marty for the 4th Ward. It's only things that are given to you personally, so let's not
I
go
went
there.
to a financial disclosure conference at the last regional meeting or the one before, and I asked that specifically, and they said campaign contributions are exempt. And when you think about that, the people who passed this financial disclosure are our legislators, and they don't want to do that. So it's exempt. So you can't use that.
Right.
We have to do something a little bit separate from that.
Yeah. So as he said, this comes from the town of Frederick, which has a population of 66,400.
Yeah, and it's way too big.
Yeah, in general, I said I agree, but I'd like to tailor it for something that suits our local situation. So the state of Maine, for example, only requires towns with populations of more than 15,000 to have campaign finance disclosure. On the other hand, Massachusetts requires it of all towns. I gather we have no state requirement here. If I've not been able to find a town of approximately this size on the Eastern Shore that has such an ordinance, so maybe we'll lead the way. The closest I came was Salisbury, which has a population of 31,000. So one of the ways to tailor this a little bit, I would like to see us reduce the number of reports required to 2. One probably during the second half of the campaign, and another one shortly after the end of the campaign. Whatever number we agree on, I think 4 or 5, as laid out in the ordinance from Frederick, is too many. I will also suggest that expenses be reported in the financial disclosures, not just contributions, because there are well-known cases where it's the use of the funds contributed that called into question, not just the amounts given and by whom.
It's hard to run and go to Las Vegas and say, well, I had to go to Las Vegas to see my
Or I really needed that vacation in the Caribbean. Right? So I have some other minor things, but those are my major concerns. So just maybe we could go around with initial thoughts. And like I said, if Marty's agreeable, I'd like to get your comments in writing by March the 10th, and then we could maybe work up a new draft for a March 17th meeting.
Yeah.
And then would we need to have don't we need to have a public hearing?
What you have is you introduce any ordinance at one meeting, and then not sooner than 6 days, or is it 6 or 60? You have to have. You have to advertise it
Right.
twice.
Twice.
And then in that period of 6 to 60 days, I think, or it might be 16 to 60, then you can pass it.
Well, then I would suggest that we're shooting for something, and so this is February. So early April, late March or early April.
We have time. I mean, we don't have an election coming up for another 2 years.
No, I
But
mean, naturally,
I just
we
didn't
don't
want
have to.
as I said to you earlier, I didn't want to be one of these things that we brought up and then people just kind of forget about it until it's too late to
Right.
do anything about it,
Well, we have an
so.
election next year, right?
No, the following year.
2 years.
16, you're right, I'm sorry. Jumping too ahead.
Well, it doesn't cover an authority line, but if you're going to put the mandates on the candidate and the treasurer, why not on the campaign material?
Do what?
The authority line
I'm not sure.
on your campaign.
By authority.
Authority of and whoever your treasurer is. And then you run into a situation here where you talk about if the personal treasurer resigns, and then you have to have another treasurer, how do you handle the authority line on pre-printed campaign material?
I don't think
That
that
was just
relates.
one question that I had.
I have seen signs where they've been up there and the people just get a little thing and glue a new name on it.
Uh-huh.
And that's-
Yeah, I mean, if you want to reuse your campaign material, but I'm talking within the election, period, that your treasurer resigns and you've pre-printed your campaign material with your authority line with the treasurer who has resigned.
Right,
Is that the scope of this
yeah.
ordinance?
It's,
I'm not
you
sure.
have it on here.
I think they've went overboard on this treasurer thing in here, quite frankly. I don't think that you have to have separate letters and all that. I think if you file a filing and you name your treasurer, and if he does die or leave, or you have an argument, and they leave, then you'll have to make that change, but.
And then this should be clarified too. Personal contributions and expenses of candidates. I know campaigns that I've worked on previously with the commingling of corporate funds and non-corporate funds and personal funds. And the question came up with if a corporation contributes to a PAC and you accept money from a PAC, which we don't have any PACs in Chestertown.
I don't think
So, you know, that's just kind of gone overboard there. But I'm, you know, from the past
You're doing
experience, yeah, that I've had here, basically, I don't think we can afford a primary in a general election. And, let's see, it doesn't cover loans. It doesn't cover, if I'm, and I've had this happen with campaigns that I've worked on, if the candidate is running short, they will loan money to their campaign. And so how do they handle payback of a loan if they're, at the end of the campaign, they're in excess of monies that they need?
It's an allowable expenditure.
So that was my three big things.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, if you'll put those concerns down in writing and send
Yeah, I
it to
have
Liz
them.
and I, and we'll
Great.
look at them.
I would just say, in general, keep it as simple as possible,
Yeah.
because we are very small. I don't think we need primaries, but I do agree that if we ever have another election with, I would say, more than 4 candidates, and the winner receives less than, say, 30%, or some low number, that there should be a runoff between the two.
Well, 35, if you have 3 members, 35% works out pretty good.
Right,
because
right.
It means that you definitely
majority.
had the majority,
Right.
so.
But I mean, I was concerned, like, hey, what if I win this mayoral election and I only have 22% of the vote? That's not good for anybody. So luckily that didn't happen, but I think we should have a backup plan if that were to happen.
Yeah,
And I was
the other
surprised that we
80
didn't, but I don't think there's ever been 6 people that wanted to be the mayor of Chestertown at any one time, ever
The other
before.
78 people might not want you, but you know, I think that was very unusual. I don't.
Yeah, it's crazy. Usually it's the opposite problem. So those would be my 2 comments.
One thing that stood out to me was the qualification to be a treasurer, and how the treasurer had to be a registered voter in Chestertown. That's awfully specific. And I know one issue that I came across, it can be kind of difficult to find qualified people who are willing to put the time and effort into helping your campaign. And in terms of just limiting, and the treasurer is a very large responsibility, so in terms of just limiting it to registered voters of Chestertown, that could very well complicate things. I mean, is that necessarily a clause that has to be included? Does the treasurer have to be a registered voter of, typically?
Well,
I
think it would be a good idea myself.
Yeah, but does it have to be a registered voter?
But in Chester, I would say in Chester.
Well, yeah, it's certainly a registered voter, but I don't think we certainly need that qualification that they have to be specifically in Chestertown. I mean, that was just one of the things that stood out to me. And in terms of disclosing everything, would it be possible to only disclose if a donation exceeds a certain amount? Say, for instance, goes over $500 or $1,000. Because I mean, there's with contributions, especially with my campaign contribution, a lot of it came from my family. You know, $50 here, $100 there, and does that all necessarily need to be reported?
Well, I don't know. Is your family ashamed that they donated to you? I don't understand why you wouldn't want that listed. I mean, personally, I'd be happy to have anybody that donates to me. I wouldn't keep it a secret.
Right.
And I would tell them, you know, it goes on a campaign form.
Right.
And I think people should know that. I don't...
The reports I've seen a lot of disclosure reports online now. And they all list everything from, you know, $5 to...
Right.
I financed my own campaign, believe me. Every nickel came from my wife because she writes the checks in our family, so...
So has this ever been a major issue in the past in terms of these campaign contributions? I mean, has it ever been scandalous, ever?
You've been here the longest.
Never been brought up as an issue.
I don't think it hurts, just like it not to be too onerous.
Right.
I think it's a good thing as long as we keep it as simple as possible.
Simple as possible.
How about the limit on contributions? Does everyone feel the limit of $500 for a council member candidate and $1,000 for mayoral candidates is appropriate?
Unless it happens to be the individual himself or his
own
spouse.
funds,
Yeah,
sure.
because that, you know, that could be burdensome for somebody who wants to finance their own campaign, so.
Most of the towns I saw were about double.
But if your
those
neighbor
levels.
wants to give you $10,000, then
Well, a neighbor can't give me $10,000 because that exceeds all kinds of limits. But I don't have many neighbors.
I don't think there should be limits.
Well,
There
are
aren't
limits
now. They're 20, what is it? I mean, for state or federal, it's 2,500.
2,500
I would have
per
to
election
look it up.
cycle.
I mean, you could just put, if you don't want to exceed, you know, violate state or federal, and just in case, you just put a $2,500 limit.
There's nothing, there's nothing that says that your contributions can't come from your Aunt Susie who lives in Albuquerque or wherever. I mean, that can happen, but Susie's name got to go down, that's all.
Right.
And then do you limit,
I'm
does
gonna
there have to be a
research
limit on
limits.
how much you can lend to yourself?
No.
Lend to yourself? If you're financing it yourself, if you want to mortgage your house, I think that's your business. Of course, you might lose your house, but otherwise.
Okay, but so why then do you want limits on council and mayoral candidates?
What is it?
Why should there be limits on the council and the mayoral candidates?
Limits on contributions.
On individual contributions.
Yeah.
From individuals?
Yes.
Because if you're campaigning your own, if you're financing your own campaign, you're buying yourself. But if
Right.
you're getting it from somebody else with a big bunch of money, then he's gonna expect something. When he calls you, you better darn sight ain't call him back, because he give you all that money. That's the idea behind it.
That's.
But if you don't answer your own phone when you're calling yourself, then forget that, so. That's the reason for it.
I think the $2,500 to be in accordance with state and federal.
I'd like to research
Is it
that a
state
little
and
bit more,
federal?
I'll come back.
It's
I'll
just
write-
state.
Federal too. Federal, it's 2,500 in the primary and 2,500 for general. I think I'm correct
Okay.
on it.
I
They're
think
also
that's-
running for different kinds of offices,
Right, and a lot
too.
more expensive.
Where the bribes are bigger.
I like 500 and 1,000 myself.
I don't have a problem with that.
Unless you
Like to
guys
get
probably have
feedback.
friends that have a lot more money than I do. I don't have any that's gonna give me 500, let alone gonna give me 1,000.
All right,
Maybe we can send suggestions about that.
yes, please do.
Okay.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, does that bring us up to my
Yep.
report? Okay. So this is the first order of business under the mayor's report, which is the formation of a Fountain Park Committee to study long-range maintenance options for the park. As you all know, Fountain Park has been in the news a lot lately because we've basically been loving it to death. It's a great open space and it gets used a lot, and it's starting to show the fact that it's used as much as it is, and so we've discussed this at length about.
I like that statement. They
We
loved it to death.
Yeah, I read that about our national parks once. I have to give them credit. But, so this led to, I actually had lunch with Barb Macbeth and Michelle. Michelle, I'm going to get your name. How do you say your last name? Schweikel. And basically, we just kind of met and discussed the garden history with, helping to found the park and the long-term maintenance that they've done on the park over the years. And, we were kind of brainstorming about how we can come up with some sort of long-term maintenance plan, not just for the grounds, but also potentially for how it's used. And this was in the task force report. It was one of the most frequent comments at our last meeting that we should move it to Wilmer Park, and then a lot of people got up and said they didn't like that idea. So basically, what we came up with was, let's get a group of stakeholders together and form this committee. I don't like putting together task forces that meet indefinitely and just kind of give you a stack of papers that nobody ever acts on. So the idea is that this committee, which by the way will be an official public body, will meet probably starting later this month, and will essentially meet, we won't, probably about 4 times, and will report back to us with their recommendations by mid to late April. And the idea is that if their recommendations involve any monetary allocations for park maintenance, that if we're amenable to the suggestions, that we might be able to discuss that as a line item in the forthcoming budget that we'll be discussing later this spring. So I just want to read this piece of paper that kind of describes specifically what the goals of we'll call it the Strategic Planning Committee will be, and the members that we're going to be nominating here this evening. So I'm just going to read this whole thing. As the central node of downtown Chestertown and arguably the most important green space in our county seat, Fountain Park is more than deserving of the attention of a strategic planning committee that will study the following. 1, the restoration of the most vulnerable assets of the park, soils, plants, and trees, and particularly the root systems. 2, the protection of the assets that may be restored by improving function, i.e. better pedestrian flow with intended entries and exits, and spatial fitness, perhaps widening paved paths, sidewalks, and gathering spaces. In other words, these folks will discuss and examine different options for improving the infrastructure that exists there now if we want to continue having events there like we do currently. 3, the enhancement of the park's features and function by providing protection of the vulnerable assets with paving or low decorative fencing. And then this document continues, the town has been provided with updated site information, soil studies, and a preliminary design that shows options for design development over the long term. Framed by this research and the consult of a landscape architect and arborist, the appointed committee would create a plan that would include the funding needed for incremental action and a long-term plan for park renovation and maintenance. This plan would be presented on April 21, 2014, the day before Earth Day. Proposed committee members and stakeholders are as follows. Number 1, Nancy McGuire, representing DCA and also the Historic District Commission. 2, Nancy Butler, representing Curb Appeal. 3, Owen McCoy, representing the Farmers Market. Members 4, 5, and 6 are Nora Carey, Michelle Schweikel, Barb Macbeth, representing the Chester Tire and Garden Club. 7 would be Case DeMoy, representing Town Hall. 8, Linda Kuiper, representing Town Council, since this is in her ward. And 9, Beverly Miller, representing the Artisans Market.
That needs to be changed to
Yeah,
Wanda.
yeah, that just occurred to me. Sorry, Wanda.
Okay. Well, I did get a copy with Wanda's name on it.
Maybe this isn't the most recent one.
Is this from you, Chris?
This is from me via email. So then the last statement is, these public meetings would be announced in full accordance with Maryland state law, possibly held in the upstairs of the Kent County Chamber of Commerce meeting, or in Town Hall, or in the Kent County Public Library. We're hoping we'll be able to use the second floor of Town Hall. Every other Wednesday, beginning February 26th, giving 10 days ahead of notice after the announcement on the 17th. So the idea is that this committee will probably have 4 meetings over the next 2 months and then report back to us in April. Did I miss anything, guys?
And Mayor, I think for everybody's information, particularly the press, the minutes of the meetings will be posted in a notebook at the front desk here in Town Hall, so you'll be able to follow up and see what we've been discussing.
Yep, and also because these will be open meetings, they'll also be allowed to just be at the meeting, as can anybody in this room or anybody in the community that has an interest in what these guys are discussing. So that's important to note, particularly in light of the recent developments with our task force. So that's the concept. Do we need a motion to officially create this group, or do you guys have comments?
You didn't before.
It says it starts on the 26th.
I think that, I don't know that we set the meeting dates. I think once the group, I think the first meeting was targeted for February 26th.
Yes, sir.
And I think at that point, you guys can set your own meeting dates.
Perfect.
But just as long as you let us know, and then we can advertise them for the public.
Yeah, if you get them to me, I'll include them in our calendar that goes out monthly, and I can also update it on the website.
Good.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any comments or ideas about this?
I would just like to appeal that if consideration is given to increasing the hard surfaces in the park, that the committee looks hard at surfaces that are pervious and not add any more impervious surface to the park, because that's part of the problem. is The compaction becomes basically an impervious surface.
So again, do we need to make a motion to create?
According to the case we had with the open meetings, it didn't matter whether you did or not. I think it's always better to create and name a committee by resolution.
I move that we create, what do we call it?
The Fountain Park Strategic Planning Committee.
Fountain Park Strategic Planning Committee, as proposed in the document.
Is there an acronym for
Read into
that?
the record by the mayor.
The FPSPC. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So it's unanimously approved. And I want to really thank the folks from the Garden Club for taking the initiative to request a meeting and come up with this plan of action, which I'm really hoping will, I think we have all of the major stakeholders at least represented, and certainly others can attend.
Where does this leave the Miles Bernard document that we skipped over today?
I think that they're compatible. I wish he could have been here. I thought Jen was calling him, Jen thought I was calling him, but I always said it was the first step you know,
Presumably, he'll interact with
he's
that
part of it.
committee, right?
The committee also has to be aware that we have to pay for this, so
Yes.
the bottom line means something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you, guys. The next item, draft resolution for a request of funds. This is something that I would like to see us do, and it is kind of the result of the, I'll just say, discussions that we had over the War of 1812 donation that we recently committed to. And I'm not in any way saying that that was not a worthy event, and that us giving them money was not a good idea. And I hope that it's a huge success and benefits the town. But what was clear to me was that we currently have no protocol established amongst this body for when groups come in to ask us for money, and particularly when this happens between budgeting sessions. And the result in that case was that I think other members of the council were caught really off guard, and we felt kind of unprepared when the request was made. And as a result, it was my feeling that we, as a result, I didn't feel like dealt with their request as professionally as I would like to see us do in the future. And I'm not also discouraging groups from coming to ask us for money. I simply feel like we need a procedure in place that sets up a logical, sequential, and professional way for us to get requests, disseminate the information with the requester, and then give us all time to consider the request and make an educated response at a later date. So my proposal is that in the future, when groups come to us asking for money, and I'm specifically talking about between budgeting sessions, that we get their request in writing, and that we ask them for basic information, the name of the group, the nature of the group, whether they're a nonprofit entity or a historical society or a Department of Tourism, how much they want, why they want the money, how the money is going to be utilized, how the town will see a return on our investment, and if there's matching funds involved or a budget, it would be great to see that as well. And then the group can give us their request in writing, state their case at a meeting. We would then not vote on the request that evening, but would basically take the request into consideration, and then ask questions between meetings of the people that presented if we felt we needed to, and then vote at the next meeting. So again, I'm not saying that this means that we're never going to approve another request between budgeting sessions ever again. I simply want us to establish a protocol for how we deal with these requests in the future so that we look a little bit more prepared and professional. As a member of a nonprofit, when we ask people for money, we fill out 20-page applications requesting every piece of information on God's green earth about us. And I feel like if we simply give groups a one-page form asking for these basic pieces of information, it will be helpful, and I think it would ultimately help the groups to know how the process should work. And I had Bill just come up with a draft.
I never got a hard copy of it, though. Here it is.
Okay, I got hard copies if y'all didn't. Got one?
Well, I want to ask a question.
Sure.
What group, nonprofit, or individuals have ever come to the town?
We've had, in the past, we've had, and it's all been little. I mean, we've had people come and ask for $100 here or there, prom night, non-drinking
Okay.
prom night. And we never have really had a good process. It's all, there was a time when we were absolutely ungenerous, and I think that we're in a position now, if it goes along with our missions, that we can be. And I think this is a good way of sort of organizing things that are above 500. Most of our requests were either under it or somebody that was going after a grant, and I can't think of the example of grant where we help with a match, but it's generally somebody like Bernadette or
Right, Eastern Shore Heritage, I think.
Eastern Shore Heritage. Gail Owens came in here, and they hit us.
Well, that's in the budget. Stories in
We
Chester.
ended up
It's in the budget.
putting it in, but the first time they came, it wasn't.
Okay.
And is it March all the time? No, it's not. So you're going to get requests in August or October, and I think this is a good way of saying, okay, organize your thoughts, because this is for the big money. This is for $500 to $5,000.
I think
And I
it's
think
make-
it's implicit in here that if somebody's asking for less than that, that's discretionary on the council, doesn't involve a process. And it says above 5,000, you basically are getting into the budget process, the annual budget process. So I think it's a start. I mean, I can see how people might have a comment one way or the other, but I think it organizes you pretty well and tells somebody, we won't have an avalanche of people saying, oh, they're giving away money at town hall, and I never thought we would, because it's never been easy to get money from town hall.
No, this makes sense to me. It makes a whole lot of sense. My only objection is I'd have it $300, but I'm sure I'm not going to get the
I'd
council to
like to
agree
add
with that.
one slight change, and that is to say that no group, you can't come multiple times asking for $499. You know, you could only make one such request in a budget cycle.
Oh, that makes sense too.
In other words, you can't get around it by asking $500 4 times.
I think we'd catch on to that. We'd write another policy.
All right. You think
We'd
it's
have another resolution.
I just, and I sent you an email, it was like, I can't remember since in the past 2 years that I've been on the council, the DCA asked for money for the benches.
Actually, we didn't ask for it, the mayor suggested.
Okay,
But-
okay.
But for the digital sign, there have been lots of agencies over time, and it's never been a lot, and it's always been for good cause. But sometimes,
I didn't remember.
probably not so much in the last 2 years, but I mean, I think we could probably find you a potpourri of them by going on the cloud and putting ask for.
Well, I just want to thank you for the 24 pages. I know that
I thought you'd like that history. It's history.
after 5 o'clock.
It's not for tonight's discussion, it's for history. It's for your love of the past.
I don't know, so I just wanted to
Yeah.
thank you.
I
think.
personally like this resolution, and I would move that we adopt it.
I second that.
Well, do you want to, I mean, I'll go for below 200. I'll go for 200.
But you wanted to vote for a $500.
Wait a minute, don't argue if she's agreeing with you.
I got what I wanted. But here's another
I
thing.
got what I wanted.
Here's
that's all
another
past
thing. As we do the budget, we need to consider, I mean, we're not going to celebrate the War of 1812,
Yeah.
for another 100 years.
Yes.
But,
We'll build into this next 100 years for that.
we'll put a percentage away each year. But is there something else that could come up in the next
Yes.
5 years?
I think that what we're going to do is
That we'll celebrate that will be coming through the Department of Economic Development.
the War of 1817 is coming up in 5 years. No, I think that what we're going to do this year, if we have the money, is put a contingency and understanding this is going to happen.
Discretionary fund.
Right, and we're going to change the categories a little bit based on your understanding, say, of the hotel tax fees and all. So it's more understandable to council. This is more or less going for that, but that'll be in the pre-budget thing. Once we get the line items, you'll have to have your text from the original budget, workshops.
But the other thing that not voting on it at that meeting can help us do is have us all come into agreement on, okay, it's going to come out of this line item, which I think was one of the issues at our last meeting is, I think we have maybe right now some philosophical differences over how the hotel tax is used, and that's kind of a separate issue. I'm just saying we should have a set way of responding to requests that gives us the most information we can get and then gives us a nice amount of time to consider it so that when we make the response, we're making it from an informed, professional position and not just reacting to it at that moment.
We're not even saying in here they got to give us receipts for the fact that they spent our $500 or whatever it was for something. And I'm not sure that wouldn't be nice too, but I don't know whether council would want that.
So is there a motion?
Well, I
Is
have a
there-
motion and a second.
Yes.
We're still in
You do?
discussion, yeah.
As far as the discussion goes, then, would it be totally separate as far as, where was it, the line item? Wait a minute. I had my
$500.
transferring, shoot, doesn't have anything. If you accept a grant, and I put this in my email, if you accept a grant and the project goes over the grant, do we kind of do like a little add-on here as far as transferring monies from one area of the budget? I mean, I think we should vote on whether we transfer monies from one area of the budget to another, because the grant project went over the grant
I agree.
amount.
Well,
And,
and that's why I put in here about having the town financial staff get you a budget change execution thing, so if it did come from one fund, if you said, okay, well, we don't have it in the contingency anymore for the hotel tax, but we think it's just as worthy that we got this from some other source.
Yeah,
So-
nothing to do with the
So then
hotel
you
tax.
guys
Yeah.
sign it, it's like a resolution, it's there, it's for the auditor says, okay, and 4/5, I think, is a reasonable thing to ask. You all have to be pretty convinced that there's a need for this in between budgets.
That was my other question too, was the need for, it's almost a super majority rather than a simple majority for funding requests between budget.
I put that in there because I really think you need to do that. You're always going to get somebody who says, I don't want that out of that fund, I don't want that. But if 80% of the council wants it, it's that supermajority you need to make a change. And I don't think it's going to be difficult to get if it's a good cause.
And the other thing I like about this section is it does force us to look at the impact of our decision on the overall budget.
Right.
Which, otherwise you might never do.
Well, we do it monthly when things come up, like a burst line on Water Street. So we have to acknowledge that happened. Salt right now.
I saw $27
I
million.
don't want it. Yeah, did she send it out?
Yes.
What's our alternative?
It's on here.
Yeah.
And you know what's not going to happen? I don't think we're going to have a state of emergency because we had small snow, medium snow, small, medium, and it runs your salt out like you had 36 inches of snow and there's no
I'll
emergency.
tell you another thing that's waiting to vote the following week is takes the emotional part out of it.
Yes,
Somebody
exactly.
comes in here with a bleeding heart, but then you get to thinking, well, wait a minute, this isn't really something we should be doing with our taxpayers' money. I mean,
Or the opposite
you
can
have to
happen.
remember, every time we give money away to somebody, it comes out of somebody that lives next door to my house or across the street. It's their taxpaying money. And would they really want to go to that cause? So it
And
takes a
some-
little bit of the emotion.
And sometimes it does come from a different source, and that source was meant to be what you're spending it for. And I've put together all the different categories that I think relate to the hotel tax, and it's ready for you now. You've been asking for it at least last year, so where we put the fireworks in there, and you put it all together, and you'll see that we've been very good about spending all the hotel tax things on tourist-type activities. It's been hard because the way our budget goes, it's general fund accounting for government. And the lines don't match, you don't match up a revenue here with a specific expense over here, 30 pages away, so.
Or if we had a separate budget for it. But it would be
I mean, in
nice
our audit.
also
Yeah.
to advertise that on the website.
To what?
How we thank the tourists for coming here.
I will do that now.
Yeah.
Now that we've collected it, and I want to show you this year's too, because it won't be dissimilar from last year's.
All right, but that's a separate
Yeah.
issue from this.
Yep, it
So
is.
does anybody do we need to make any changes to this?
Well, I'd like to see it 300, but I don't think I'm going to get
I
any.
thought you said 200.
She was agreeing with you.
I thought you said 200.
3.
3. I'll go for 3.
All right. So
You hear all right?
if the request is over 300,
Not what I wanted, so.
did you catch that, Bill?
Yeah, I got it. And
So
let's
if the
give
request is over
let's want
300, then we use this protocol that's outlined.
You guys want this out there? in media land. Do you want this?
Yeah,
Here, let's-
300.
Got, she's got 300.
Okay, so there was a motion.
Can I have a second from Liz?
And we amended it in the motion. Now, I
Aye.
call you, the discussion finished, you want?
I think we've
Oh,
discussed.
that's his
Ready for a
job.
vote?
Okay, all those in,
Be advertised in any way?
That's a
That's a
resolution.
resolution.
Doesn't have to be.
No, I mean,
It's a resolution.
all those in favor?
All right.
No,
Any
we're not.
opposed?
I wouldn't know. That
Okay,
was-
so that's our new protocol for requests over $300. This next item deals with the Historic District Commission, and we do have a member that is resigning. I'm going to read his letter. This is from Doug Gates, who has served admirably on the HDC. It says, "Dear Chris, I am resigning from the Chestertown Historic District Commission as soon as a new member is approved by the town council. I'd made this arrangement with Mayor Bailey. I understand from Case there is a replacement waiting in the wings. It has been a pleasure serving on the commission these many years. All things have their moments, and it is time for a new turn. I wish you all the very best in your new turn as mayor of Chestertown. I have no doubt whatsoever that you will be successful in leading our town forward. Most sincerely yours, Doug Gates." So I want to thank Doug for his service to the community, having been on the planning commission as a volunteer for many years. He put his time in, and we should all, if you see Doug around, thank him for his service.
Your neighbor, isn't he?
He lives 2 houses down from me, so I kind of have
What'd you
to say
do to
that
him?
as well. But he is a great guy and was a really good member of the HDC. And with his resignation, I would like to appoint a replacement, and I would like to nominate Ed Minch to fill that vacancy. He had submitted a resume to be on the planning commission. I didn't nominate him in part because he lives right across the street from Jeff Grotzky, who is the chair of the planning commission, and kind of wanted to spread the wealth around to different parts of the community for that commission, but I think he makes a lot of sense for the Historic District Commission.
Has he expressed interest?
Yes, he definitely has expressed
Same
interest.
thing. I reviewed his resume today, and I fully support the
Did you
nomination.
email the resume to us?
We got it ages ago for the planning commission.
We do have it on file, but it
Yeah.
was for the planning commission.
Can I make a suggestion to the people who are interested in being appointed to commissions, come in so we could meet them?
That's not a bad
They
idea.
could say a few words.
Sure, that's a good suggestion.
So can we get his, I might have gotten his, probably got his
I'll
resume.
get you another copy of it.
Ages ago. And could we invite him to come in to
Sure.
the next meeting?
This is after we appoint them, right?
I don't-
Not when they're applying.
No,
That's what I was
I'd like
thinking.
I'd like to hear from them, you know, if they're interested in being on a commission.
Well, sometimes we have, like, we've had 4 and 5 people, and you have them all come in here, and
We have
they all
7 or 8
tell
for
what
the
good, and then you gotta tell 4 of them that we don't like them? I think,
No, I mean,
I think a resume is fine, and then we select them, and then if they wanna come in and have them come in after they've been selected. I mean, how many did you have in the last time? There was about 5 or
I
6.
think there were
right?
6 or 7, yeah.
all at the same time.
Right, we had one
Yeah.
email that had all the resumes.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve Ed Minch to the Historic District
I
Commission?
move we appoint him to the
I'll
Historic
second it.
District Commission.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I'm not opposed, I just don't know.
So are you abstaining?
Yeah, I'll do that, because
Four,
I don't know what
four
I'm voting.
yays
what
and
I'm
1
voting for.
abstention. Last item on my report is, I just wanted to give everyone an update on the activities of the Recreation Commission led by Bill Arrowood. I don't know if you guys have been aware, but I guess he did come talk to us about a month ago about his ongoing efforts to build a baseball field at Kent County Middle School, and he recently met with the school board, and essentially he was given the okay to move forward pending agreements between the town and the county on how that field, if it were to come to pass, would be maintained. In other words, we need to have a discussion if this moves forward about who's going to fund the maintenance going forward, whose staff will do it, and those are discussions that may need to happen between the town and the county. And Bill's budget, he had it budgeted, I believe, for around $25,000 for the construction. He is attempting to raise $20,000 himself, and I told him if, I didn't want to commit the council to any financial commitments until we knew if he was going to be successful. And if he was successful, then he was going to request $5,000 from the mayor and council to help get that built. So that is still an ongoing project.
Do you know whether the county's going to put any money into it at all?
He is going to ask them for some assistance, yes.
Because they're definitely going to use it. I mean, they got
Oh, yeah.
every middle school kid in the
Absolutely.
county doing there all day long and in the evenings.
That's correct.
Has he approached, I guess, the T-ball league or Babe Ruth or whatever? Would they even utilize it if it was constructed, or are they?
That's a good
focused on
question.
Just Wharton, because if they're not going to utilize it, what's the point? If it's just going to be a passive.
I think that is an ongoing discussion that Bill is having with the
Right.
various leagues. He seems to think they have enough interest. I know the same question was asked of him at the school board meeting. And so I don't want to speak for him,
Right.
but that's something that if he comes back with an update on this, we should get that information from him. So along these same lines, we have had discussions, Bill has had discussions with John Johnson at the county level, who is in charge of all the facilities that the county owns, including the school properties. And there was an idea on the table years ago about possibly going in with the county for a grant application to help the middle school fix up their tennis courts. I don't know if you've been back there recently, but there used to be really nice tennis courts there. They've fallen into disrepair over the years, and it's basically an unutilized space that it becomes a little bit less usable each year. So that's an idea that I discussed with Mr. Johnson today, and nothing was decided, but that's one way that we could potentially help the school system and help every kid in the county, as you noted, would use that space. And it may not be that they get resurfaced as tennis courts. It may be that they tell us they'd rather have it utilized as a multi-purpose area.
Or
what have
basketball.
you. Yeah, or what have, whatever.
Let me give you an example. We had somebody come to the Optimus Club a number of years ago when we had a lot more young people, and they wanted money to start tennis over at the middle school for middle school kids. I went over there, and I never saw more than 6 kids show up for the tennis thing. I mean, they were giving them brand new rackets and balls and whatever you do in tennis. They just weren't there. But I bet you if they put four basketball courts up there, we'd have lots of people playing basketball.
And John Johnson was amenable to that, wasn't he? As long as it was for the middle school age kids generally?
He didn't want to commit to anything without talking to Dr. Couch first.
Yep.
And I think that's a good way to go. And so I just want to throw that out there because that may be a future discussion that we would have in conjunction with Mr. Johnson, with Dr. Couch, and our Recreation Commission to see, if that's something that the school really wants, it would be neat if we could help them maybe identify some funding sources to improve recreational amenities for the kids, because all the kids in the county would use that, and it's a logical first area.
If we help get them the money and help pay for it, they can't keep us out of there like they try to do now.
So unless anyone has any more comments or questions on that, that's all that I had for the evening. Okay, let's move along to ward reports, starting with Ward 1, Liz Groves.
All is quiet in Ward 1, to the best of my knowledge. You're gonna kick up.
With a 3% incident,
Yeah, you don't even have pothole
all
complaints,
your
right?
people must go to bed at 9 o'clock.
There
Don't
was
be
some
begging.
patching done in the last
Yeah,
little while, I
we
noticed.
did. We went, when it was a little bit dry, we went out and patched some potholes. I'm sure there's
The big one at the
potholes
corner of
everywhere.
Rolling Road and Campus Assistant Patch.
You know,
I was in his
shoemakers'
office
children.
complaining about that pothole. I went home and I happened to be going down to the dog park and the darn thing was fixed. Now, I think it was being fixed while I was talking to him,
That's what
so.
happened
Oh,
to me
I
with
called
the
right
snow.
while you were here.
Yeah, you went out there and did it
He has a
yourself,
secret
right?
Marty button behind it.
Please fix that pothole.
It was almost a sinkhole, it was more than a pothole.
Yeah,
All right, let's keep going. We got Ward 2, Linda Kuiper.
Okay, snow removal, I hope that the town crew gets commended for their cleaning up for the farmer's market again. And the farmers really appreciated it. And even one of the town crew helped one of the residents on High Street clean up in front of the businesses on High Street. Now, on the flip side of this, the businesses didn't go out and clean up in front of their, their stores, their storefronts. But one of the town workers and one of the residents up there in the section of High Street in between, on the other side of this, JR cleaned his, but on either side and down the street a little bit. So please thank the town crew and thank them very much for cleaning everything up for the farmer's market. It means a lot because it's dangerous. And then if you have to stand 4 hours in the ice and snow while you're selling your produce, it means a lot to them, it really does. So thank you to the town crew. Okay, the artisans group had their meeting on Sunday and to plan for this year at the farmer's market. And I only have one copy of this, and I'll just pass it around, but I'd like it back. This is a trifold brochure that Nancy McTier had designed back when Suzanne Street was manager of the market, but I don't think they ever got printed. I don't know. And so just to keep in the back of your mind, from the revenue that the artisans and the farmers pay to the town, they would like you to think about having these printed to put in the visitor center and maybe Rock Hall or just around town. And they also do other shows and take them with them. This is just a work in progress. But Nancy McTier has done a wonderful job of putting it together.
How much do they pay? How much do they pay the town?
We'd have to look on the budget to see how much revenue we get. But anyway, I lost my train of thought.
You take it down the show.
They can distribute it wherever they go. Plus, they had considered maybe a handout for the restaurants downtown, because Wanda said, they always have people coming into the market and they're always telling them, you can, where the fish whistle is, you can pretty much see Lemon Leaf. But just, and the cards, they aren't that expensive. I mean, Vistaprint, you can practically get them for nothing. They have so many sales. But
so there's
like I
farmers
said,
and there's artisans and farmers.
One side is
Yeah.
the farmer's market and one
So
side is...
they're getting along better.
I didn't know. It all depends on who can handle who.
That's
and then
great.
it's like, Linda.
What are you going to do about when the shopping center people come in here and say, will you pay for our brochures to go out to all the people?
Do they pay to set up in the farmer's market?
They pay more taxes than that. They pay like $5 a week or something down there to be in that farmer's market. I'd like to see them, if they're doing so well, rent a store.
Sam, don't pass it to him. Just pass it back around this side. It's advertising for the town, for downtown.
Well, I'd like to advertise for Ward 4. We have a shopping center that has a lot of empty stores. They'd love us to print something like this for them.
Anyway, like I said, it's just something to think about. Nancy McTier, out of her own pocket, manages the website. And didn't she pay for the domain? I think Nancy even pays out of her pocket for the domain. And I would love to see the farmer's market page on our website replaced with a link to hers. She's been posting pictures on Facebook all winter, and it's like everybody's just, drooling, waiting for tomatoes and, fresh flowers and everything. And also, the DCA page on the website, the town's website, is out of date. I made a list.
It's a link from ours, and so they're links from ours. It's not like we control those. They're links.
I don't,
And I don't quite know what you're talking about.
yeah, I don't think the DCA is a link, but it's still got Washington Tavern on it,
I know the
and
farmer's market is.
this,
Is
the
it Nancy
farmer's,
McTier, did you?
Nancy McTier
Okay.
did this,
Okay.
and she does the website for the farmer's market. And if we could link her site to the website, because the one that's on the town website is
Okay.
outdated. And
Make a list of anything on the website that's outdated, because I want to tackle that next month, actually.
and the DCA's page is outdated too.
So, who does the DCA webpage? So it's a link,
We'll talk to Andy. Okay.
yeah.
When we redo the website, we'll talk
Not
to
the
all these.
DCA's actual website, it's
No.
what's on our
Our
list.
comments about the
Okay.
DCA.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's our list of.
So it is our fault.
Talk to her about printing that. Is that
Okay, it's now finished.
when she's finished?
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
Okay.
Anything else, Linda?
I think that was it.
Okay. Sam?
A lot of the complaints that I've gotten revolve around Mount Vernon and Campus Avenue. So that's just going to be a running dialogue that we have about the sight lines from Mount Vernon onto Campus Avenue. Because during the day, I mean, when that strip is just packed with cars, pulling out is practically impossible. I mean, you literally have to creep and creep and creep just to look around the edges of some of those parked
Right.
cars. So if it's just a matter of extending that yellow strip, I think we exchanged an email.
Yeah, you and I are going to go out there and we're going to put an actual line there, and when the weather's warm enough, maybe late this week, we
Right.
could paint it.
That'll
Okay?
be perfect. And then and again, we had an exchange of email about the parking enforcement on Campus Avenue, and what was going on with the meter maid and one of the complaints that one of my residents brought up. So, on another note, the cycling club for Chestertown looks to be gaining a lot of traction. So, looks like our inaugural ride is going to be on April the 2nd. And preliminarily, it looks like we're going to be riding to Galena and back. So this is just another form of recreation for the town and the residents, as well as the county as well. So just to get people more involved, more engaged. So we have a Facebook group, excuse me,
April 2nd?
April 2nd.
Can we
It's a
get in
Wednesday.
shape to ride to Galena by April 2nd?
30 miles.
We get to see you
30
in
miles round
spandex.
trip.
Oh, my, oh, my.
A little more.
Maybe.
Linda's
Linda's
saying that April 2nd is a Wednesday.
Pardon?
Is that true?
Yes, it is.
It'll be 35 miles.
35.
I've ridden it many times.
Okay, 35.
And it could be really.
Well, according to
you're in the
Google,
club.
it's 30, so.
Well,
There's the chase car.
they probably go right from the line to the line.
Right.
I'm going from my
Oh,
house.
like when you don't know how to airplane.
So, so that's
Bring it
exciting.
back.
And
It had to bring me back.
now, and again, after the dialogue that we had at the public forum, one thing that was mentioned quite a bit was, of course, the lack of African Americans represented at the meeting. When I was campaigning in Ward 3, that's something that came up quite a lot, that when it comes to their voice and when it comes to their opinions, it only matters come election time. And these are the sentiments that I heard from a lot of people, that the town council only comes to their area, only comes knocking on their door during election times. And one of the things that I kind of thought would be an interesting idea, something to start changing that dialogue, changing the perception, is to have one of our council meetings at Big Mix's Barbershop. He is one of the few black business owners in Chestertown. He's been up and operational for about close to 2 decades now. I think it would be a fantastic gesture.
Has he been in that center for 2 decades?
Not that center.
Yeah, right.
But he's been in several different locations around Chestertown. But, his business is going strong. He just recently renovated his shop in Kent Plaza. I think it would be a very good gesture of goodwill to have one of our council meetings at his shop. I know this is something that has never been done before, but I think it would be a good idea.
Did you have a date in mind that you wanted to target?
Preferably sooner.
Yeah, because there might be changes.
Yeah.
There are
I
going
thought
to be
about that.
changes,
Yeah.
so it would have to happen much sooner rather than later. And I think it's something that will gain a lot of traction in the community by having one of our council meetings there. It is a fantastic outreach opportunity that the town council, can potentially do. So I would actually like to make a motion. Now, we can do this tonight, or if you all want to have more dialogue about it, we could very well do this at the next council meeting. But I think it would be a great idea to have one of our meetings at a shop.
That's such a dangerous precedent. And then Dixon comes in and says, why can't you have your meeting at our place? And then the hospital comes in and meets it. Why can't you come to our place?
Right.
This is the town council. There's no reason your gentleman from the barbershop can't come in here and express. Nobody here has barred people out for one reason. The African American community is welcome here anytime on any issue. And this is where it should take place, right here in this town hall. This is a public hall. The next thing you know, we'll be going to churches and we'll be going to schools, and it's not something that I think we should start a precedent. This is the town hall. This is where the town council meets. We advertise it that way, and I'm not in favor of it. And it has nothing to do with race or anything else. It's just not a good precedent.
Well, I mean, yes, it would be setting a precedent, but I honestly don't see that happening very often in the future, with more groups coming in requesting, why not have the meeting at their place of business.
Well, you requested. I haven't seen the gentleman himself come in here and requested. He hasn't come in and asked us to meet up there. I just don't think that's a good idea. I mean, it's just not a place where you have a council meeting. Council meetings are supposed to be in the town hall. And at least if we had so many people we couldn't meet here, we had to go to an auditorium or something, that's a different story. But to go to a barber shop, regardless of who owns it, I don't care, black or white or whatever, it's not a good idea. And
What do other folks,
I can't agree with you.
what do you guys think?
Boy, I'm sympathetic to both. I'm not sure that having a single meeting at Big Mixes is going to change things all that much. If I thought it could have a really positive outcome, what do you think, Sam? I mean, do you think it'll make a difference?
I think it could, especially with his involvement in the community. I mean, just about every African American in this community knows Jamie Barrett. He's quite honestly a staple in the community. So I genuinely believe it can make a difference, and he is a staple, and he will continue to be a staple in the community as well. So I think it's a great outreach opportunity, something to start changing that perception. I mean, it was sad, and it was heartbreaking for me to hear that repeated so often, that an entire community, they felt as if, they only mattered during the election time.
What about the, what's that commercial district? I get the numbers all mixed up.
C1.
That's
That is
C1.
C1? It's probably too late now to have that forum there. I don't know how big the interior of the shop
How
is.
big is it, Sam? That, you know, to me, that sounds more like why we should be at a business, because we're having a forum about business.
Right.
It sort of kills two birds with one stone,
Right.
but we're going out to C1 to see what the conditions are in C1. We're going to the
I
shopping
have no
center.
objection to council going up there and doing but not carry on a council meeting.
Off the
That's just
forum.
not a
The
place
forum.
to do that.
And this was, the genesis of this was that he may get moved by the expansion of the Acme. So we have a physical problem that he's going to have to deal with. We have this economic expansion of the Acme, and we have this meeting with C1. So,
Well, I can do a quick pivot. You know, this would be a perfect opportunity to have that district meeting.
Do we have time to change that?
yes, we do. We're contacting them. You saw the outreach. And is it big enough? Is his shop big enough?
It would be big enough.
For all the people that might come from C1? Because maybe we start there and move into a
Right.
building at the plaza that's big enough for us to have that meeting. So we start there at Jamie's,
Yep.
and we move quickly into if there's too many people, how's that sound?
Would that
that's
help? I
perfect.
mean, it's a start.
That's a forum.
It's
I
kind
think.
of a
right.
compromise between your
Absolutely,
request
absolutely.
and what I see is fairly reasonable objection.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. So, you know, I feel as if that's a perfect compromise. I mean, just anything that we can do, not only as a gesture of goodwill, but just as a perfect outreach opportunity. So, I mean, and this aligns perfectly. I mean, it's the district that we're going to be meeting with. It's right there, and especially considering all the changes that are about to take place with the renovation of Kent Plaza.
Yeah. We'll run that idea by, is it Jamie?
Jamie.
And see what he says.
Okay.
And report back. I think that's a really good
Let
compromise.
us know, then we can get the invitations
Sure.
out.
And the same thing's true when we get to downtown merchants. Maybe we go downtown to the DCA and meet them in the C2 district when we get there. So it's a good precedent.
Right.
It's not, it's
Right,
one we want to set.
But I do want to echo your sentiments and Marty's, because Marty, yes, technically, this is a welcoming environment for everybody in town, but look, I mean, there's no African Americans in this building right now, other than Sam, and at our meeting the other night,
Are you African? Oh, God, I didn't realize that.
you know, and we had this open meeting on the task force, and other than Armand Fletcher, out of 100 people, he was the only African American. So whatever is going on, we need to think out of the box. I agree with Sam a little bit. I don't agree with you a little bit. We need to think out of the box a little bit more. And another suggestion that I might have is that you might want to have a ward meeting, like in Washington Park, with those residents, where it's a predominantly African-American community. And I'd be happy to come with you and just kind of have a roundtable discussion with those guys.
Maybe we could all go. Yeah, I'd love to go.
Yeah. So think about that as well.
Yeah,
Because I would definitely back that.
So that's it for me.
Okay, Marty?
I want to report that I thought the town did a super job in Ward 4 in cleaning the roads. I mean, we've had some really atrocious
Yeah, we have.
snowstorms and I've had really no complaints. I think we had snowplow pushed Bill told me about that, a mailbox got, but what
Knocked
the
over.
heck, the road was clean anyway. They've done a great job, and I think the town deserves a lot of credit for that, so, because it's been a rough year. very
Yes, it has.
rough. And we have potholes, but they're being taken care of.
Okay.
Otherwise, things are great in Ward 4.
Okay, any comments from the audience this evening? Nancy?
Couple things. First, is it possible that anyone can come to that C1 meeting?
Yes.
We don't, none of us work in a vacuum.
Yeah, right.
And it would be very interesting, I mean, I would think it would be very interesting to know what the problems
Sure.
are at the shopping center and vice versa.
It's not a closed meeting by any stretch. My only concern, I don't know what the turnout's going to be, and so my only concern would be space. A ton of, other people come. It would be a good problem to have, to be honest.
Right, well, I mean,
But yeah, I wouldn't have any objection.
It's happening.
Yeah, right.
And secondly, I don't think it has anything to do with African American or white or whatever. I am always appalled by how many people who do not come to the town council meeting in general. To me, it's so enlightening, and I don't see how you can really have a voice about the community unless you are participating. And I don't know, it's a real, I have no idea.
It's a conundrum.
They'll ask me what's going on, but they have an evening that they can spend here too.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, you'll have to bear with me.
Okay.
I've got to read my comments as an sort of an update on a proposal that the DCA made because I feel like it's sort of getting derailed. This is in reference to the parking presentation that we made. You know that the DCA presented a proposal for the town yard off Cannon Street as a place for merchants to park as a temporary parking solution, along with the signage for a builders and town parking area. As you can imagine, it was a surprise when the subject was expanded upon by comments at the Waterfront Task Force meeting and subsequently described in the news. We fear that the DCA's plan, which was simple and achievable, may become complicated and delayed. It would seem far too early to talk about a double-deck parking facility. So reading this expanded version with sample drawings is not something we are proposing. We want to make sure that everyone understands that. Excuse me. There are questions to be answered before any permanent plan developed. For instance, how much of a parking problem do we currently have? And what are the projections for additional problems relative to increased density, i.e. Stepney, for instance? If the town does a reasonable job, which I know is their goal, for building a permanent structure anywhere on the town yard, it should require a complete appraisal of all of the land that the town owns in that location for the highest and best use. Then a plan should be made for the entire parcel. The town yard would need to be relocated. Furthermore, I am not convinced an ugly concrete parking facility would be very pleasant for residents and guests to walk by on the trail or looming above the buildings on Cannon, or being the view of town from whatever is built in Stepney. Wherever a parking facility is located, we should think quality versus quantity. I think that Centerville and the less than advantageous location and design for their parking garage. As an example, we may want our garage to be underground with something attractive above it. I think of Annapolis. I lived there when they built the public garage, probably in the 70s, off Duke of Gloucester Street. The town of Annapolis excavated down at least one story, reducing the height, and placed it behind historic buildings. Driving through Annapolis, one does not know a garage is there until you see a parking sign. It is all part of preserving our greatest values with our lifestyle, history, appearance, not necessarily in that order. These values equate to our greatest economic value as well. I also feel that the parking is being at least two-step process. First step is to discover the extent of our parking problem. If we establish a parking location for merchants only off Cannon Street in part of the town yard with minimal improvements, so merchants will not park in front of their stores, we designate the large town parking yard as for residents and visitors with proper signage, and bag the meters with bags stenciled, "We have retired our meters in appreciation of your business." We may discover how much of a parking problem we currently have and use our process as a marketing tool at the same time. Future plans for parking may then have a baseline.
Could you make a copy, could we get copies of that, because I couldn't hear everything, so.
Sure, I'll be glad to. Well, let me give you, I just have this, but I'll send it to you.
Has a formal study on parking ever been done for
Yes,
Chestertown?
I have one on my desk.
And what were the results?
It was a study that essentially recommended that we go with parking meters to keep traffic flow
That's why they were
fluid.
put in
Yes.
When was that?
I'd have to check the date, but it was
back in the 70s.
a while back.
The guy who designed the parking garage in Annapolis, Jesse Knoll, was the planner that did the parking plan in the early 70s for the downtown. He reversed some streets, yeah.
We're talking about a 40-year-old.
Jesse Knoll.
Well, you don't know that parking garage is there. I mean, it's right alongside of
In
the City
Annapolis?
Hall. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't
Yeah,
even
right.
know it's there.
Yeah, it's clever.
90 days of the year, you can't find a place to park in Annapolis.
Well, I just want to say, I don't think a double-decker parking garage is in the cards anytime in the near future.
We can get this.
But I do think we should still study the idea of looking at the southern end of the town yard and just pushing that a little bit to the north, because there's some extra space. But I don't know, Bill and I have talked about this several times. I do think we could create a modestly nice 20 to 30 car parking area there that could theoretically serve that purpose with a...
We need something that people who want to come here and spend 4 hours, but don't have to run back to the parking.
Exactly.
Every hour. I mean, it's like
The other thing
when you go
about-
to Washington and you got to, oh
If
my
you
God, you
br-
got to look at your watch.
If you break that southern end of the parking through all the way to the rail trail, then you also have kind of a neat trailhead on the weekends or on Sundays that's not at Wilmer Park. So it could serve a dual purpose that way.
Well, we have to keep that property public access or pay the state of Maryland. What is it, $80,000?
If we sell it for something
Right.
other than
Yeah.
that, they get all the proceeds above that.
Right.
Yeah, we walked through it, and I think it'll do it'll clean the yard up, make us centralize our activities. It goes well with the Ajax course that's there, and I have to tell Pete that that's not the same Ajax that was put there in 1984. It was moved to the north. It's with a newer basketball. This deterioration that you talked about in your article the other day, you must be looking at something else. The old court is to the east. Yeah. No, it's smaller, but it's newer, and Chris and I looked at it, and we think if we put hoops at the lower end of it, break through, have an attractive parking lot with landscaping, that we can do it in-house, and it would make a nice vista to the trail and not steam up any of the neighbors.
I know, the problem is when you talk to merchants, well, everyone would say we have such a parking problem.
Yeah.
Just they sort of throw it out, and
Yeah.
speaking of the cloud, they just sort of throw out that comment. But I think it'll serve several purposes. One, the town is really trying to think through this process and through the parking, and is there a problem, and if there is, let's discover it. And also, if you're specific to merchants, when we walk around and say, if you just say, please don't park in front of your, they don't know. I mean, you're going to
Yep.
park right back there. If we say, we've also given you a place to park, so
Yeah.
there's really little excuse
That's right.
not to use it and to see if we can solve the problem inexpensively.
I would like to know, of all the parking lots on Cannon Street, which ones are owned by the town? I've been trying
On
to...
which block?
Well, okay, so the ones behind the whites, behind the old PNC Bank, is that
That's
right?
PNC owned.
Okay, what about the one across the street where Jay Yerkes now has a wood shop on part of it, where the old health food
The
store?
larger part of that is not owned by the town anymore. The asphalt was put there by the town. We rented the lot for about 10 years from Joe Strong. To the right of that, after you come out of the old mill, that 20-space parking lot is owned by the town.
Okay, so we
and
have
is
parking there?
open to the public, yes.
Nobody knows it's there. And then what about between the new health food store and Kelly McIntyre's?
All that lot was built by the town after the McCrory's fire.
Now it's usually full.
Yeah, there were 6 spaces there before the fire, literally. There were buildings, that a lot of them of which burned down. Now there's 125, plus the lot across the street, which we were looking at, that we might break through to the rail trail, which...
I would really like to see us, put up some of those blue parking signs to
Yes, I
direct
agree, yeah.
people in that direction.
That was really meant to be employee parking, but after the fire, people started putting little businesses on the backside or the inside, the Cannon Street side of those properties, and suddenly there's more need for just regular parking and employee parking and resident parking. So it's something that, like I've said a few times, it's nice to have a parking problem, because if not, you're so dead that you wish you did have one. And I think it's right to look at this every few years and say, should we have meters? Has the time come to remove them? Are our parking lots marked well enough? Does a stranger know how to get here? You know? Yeah, well, it's an obvious one. I put it out there because it's you got to get the low-hanging fruit too. So you put your little markers up. But I think that the idea that the downtown merchants had about uniform generic signs for the businesses on streets, when you do it all at the same time.
Off of High Street, there's a few more parking
Yeah, I
spots that are
mean, you can
public.
end up with too many signs and people really aren't getting the read on them. So if you have the uniformity of the signs that say more commercial district or whatever, then they're not going to be
I know when I go looking for that garage in Annapolis, I'm on the lookout for the blue sign with the
all right,
P.
we'll get you some blue signs.
Is it possible that we could put gates onto the rails and trails? Because I can see them being filled with people with bike racks, and then we've defeated everything that we've just talked about.
I think you're overthinking it right now, but I
On
mean,
weekends, it would be open, but during the week.
you wouldn't be able to drive across a basketball court. You'd have to, are we talking about this lot that we're talking about now?
Yeah.
It would be a walk. I mean, you park there and you walk, you know, through the basketball area. If that's the way, that's not a trailhead, but it could function as that. You could get to the rail trail from it.
But she's concerned that the bikers will take all the parking spots.
Well, then
Well, it's just on
we'll
weekends,
adjust
it
it.
doesn't make
If they do, that's probably another good problem.
We'll take a look at all this, but yes, it's in the works. And the parking garage,
Put
as
up
far as
too
I
many
know,
hurdles,
is
you
not.
can't answer the question.
Somebody said.
Are there any other comments from the audience?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Sam, it has nothing to do with black and white. I just don't think the government should be moving around.
I
like
hear
this.
you. I hear you. Makes sense.
I think we have a good company.
It's
Everybody
very
else
amenable to
thinks it
that.
is too.
That makes sense.